How her father came to be in possession of such great wealth is a story worth telling here, while we wait for the girl to grow up and catch our interest again. For it was no more common in 1800 than it has ever been for a poor-born and nearly illiterate man to become the richest inhabitant of his city, and so the means by which Henry Whittaker prospered are indeed interesting, although perhaps not noble, as he himself would have been the first to confess. Henry Whittaker was born in 1760 in the village of Richmond, just up the Thames from London. He was the youngest son of poor parents who had a few too many children already. He was raised in 2 small rooms with a floor of beaten earth, with an almost adequate roof, with a meal on the hearth nearly every day, with a mother who did not drink, and a father who did not beat his family. By comparison to many families of the day, in other words, a nearly genteel existence. His mother even had a private spot of dirt behind the house in which to grow larkspurs and lupines decoratively like a lady. But Henry was not fooled by larkspurs and lupines. He grew up sleeping 1 wall away from the pigs, and there was not a moment in his life when poverty did not humiliate him. Perhaps Henry would have taken less offence at his destiny had he never seen wealth around him against which to compare his own poor circumstances. But the boy grew up witnessing not only wealth, but royalty. There was a palace at Richmond, and there were pleasure gardens there too, called Kew, cultivated with expertise by Princess Augusta, who had brought with her from Germany a retinue of gardeners eager to make a false and regal landscape out of real and humble English meadows. Her son, the future King George III, spent his childhood summers there. When he became king, George sought to turn Kew into a botanical garden worthy of any continental rival. The English, on their cold, wet, isolated island, were far behind the rest of Europe on botanizing, and George III was eager to catch up. Henry's father was an orchardman at Kew, a humble man respected by his masters, as much as anyone could respect a humble orchardman. Mr. Whittaker had a gift for fruiting trees, and a reverence for them. "They pay the land for its trouble," he would say, "unlike all the others." He had once saved the king's favourite apple tree by whip-grafting a scion of the ailing specimen onto sturdier rootstock and claying it secure. The tree had fruited off the new graft that very year and soon produced bushels. For this miracle, Mr. Whittaker had been nicknamed the Apple Magus by the king himself. The Apple Magus, for all his talents, was a simple man with a timid wife, but they somehow turned out 6 rough and violent sons, including one boy called the Terror of Richmond and 2 others who would end up dead in tavern brawls. Henry, the youngest, was in some ways the roughest of them all, and perhaps needed to be to survive his brothers. He was a stubborn and enduring little whippet, a thin and exploding contrivance, who could be trusted to receive his brother's beatings stoically, and whose fearlessness was frequently put to the test by others who liked to dare him into taking risks. Even apart from his brothers, Henry was a dangerous experimentalist, a lighter of illicit fires, a roof-scampering taunter of housewives, a menace to smaller children, a boy who one would not have been surprised to learn had fallen from a church steeple or drowned in the Thames, though by sheer happenstance these scenarios never came to pass. But unlike his brothers, Henry had a redeeming attribute. 2 of them, to be exact. He was intelligent, and he was interested in trees. It would be exaggeration to claim that Henry revered trees as his father did, but he was interested in trees because they were one of the few things in his impoverished world that could readily be learned, and experience had already instructed Henry that learning things gave a person advantage over other people. If one wanted to continue living, and Henry did, and if one wanted to ultimately prosper, and Henry did, then anything that could be learned should be learned. Latin, penmanship, archery, riding, dancing, all of these were out of reach to Henry. But he had trees, and he had his father, the Apple Magus, who patiently took the trouble to teach him. So Henry learned all about the grafter's tools of clay and wax.